Hi everyone, my name's Aiden, and today I want to just for a moment, think back to, in the childhood, in your past, think of the first friend you might have had. Maybe it was, a child you met in the playground, a peer you had at school, preschool even, grade school, But I want us to go a little bit further than that, a little bit before we started, attending school and were introduced to other kids. And think back to when you're alone in a room, the first friend you might have made, as a newborn or as a year or two old. And for me, that was a bear, a teddy bear. His name's Mimi's. He is a common bear. I want to talk about sort of who Mimi's is, how I got him, and kind of why he has a special place in my heart. Mimi's, he's a common blue bear. He has two arms, two ears, but stitched on nose and eyes. Very common. On this little chest here, you can see that says "My First Teddy." And for me, he was my first teddy. And how I got Mimi's a little bit of a mystery, as I believe, talking with my parents, family, we believe that we got him around when I was about a year or two. So I didn't have him when I was first born. I kind of had him a little bit later. He was a gift, we believe. Not too sure from who or from where. But looking back online, we saw that he was actually from the Gun Company, which is a pretty popular teddy bear company or plush company as well. And yeah, he's just a common bear you see anywhere else. And so today I want to talk a little bit about, how I got him, which was, again, I mentioned before, how he was a gift, may or may not have been, from family or family friends. The only thing I could think of, perhaps maybe when I was baptized, which is around the year or two, and might have been, from an aunt or an uncle in the family that gifted him to me. And so with Mimi's, he and I have been through a lot, and the reason why he is such a special character in my life is more so because he and I have been through a lot. He has two ears, a nose. I also want to talk about some added touches that I made as a kid. A torn leg that's been ripped off a dozen times. That you can sort of see a little stitching here and there from my parents. To put them back together. And on his head, you kind of see a little bit of some burned fur. That was because for me, I would carry him everywhere. I would carry him to my grandparents, to church, to school, everywhere. He was my best friend, inside and outside of the house. And, when I would carry him around, one time where how we got this burn mark was when I was a kid. I was with my grandparents, and I would carry him on my arm, tucked under my elbow here, and I had walked up behind my grandfather, and he turned around at the grill. He had the little pincers, turned around, burned my arm as well as the top of Mimi's head, and so that's sort of how he got that burn mark. And it's something that sometimes you can't see as well because now I have a tattoo over it. But when I was younger, I always look back at the little burn mark and I would think back to Mimi's. It was also something that I would always call back to. Even his name as well is also, when I was younger, I would struggle pronunciating refrigerator. I would say fidger. Mimi's was just a simple word for me to kind of repeat where I said it. Everyone kind of knew what I was talking about, either sleep or Mimi's, the teddy bear. And so with Mimi's, I had, his name kind of brings me back to, kind of before, everything became a bit too, chaotic and messy. Kind of thinks back to, I enjoy thinking back to the good old days, I suppose. He's a classic bear I had. And, whenever I see him, I just think of my childhood. I think of, because he's been with me, essentially my whole life. I've had pets that have passed away, friends that have moved, but Mimi's has kind of always been there, a constant in my life. I usually have him on my shelf. I don't cuddle with him, anymore, but I just have him in my closet maybe, on top of my shelf, just kind of always there. Just kind of remind me of, I guess my childhood a little bit. And yeah, that is sort of, Mimi's, who he is, what he is, and how I got him. And yeah, he's a special bear to me because he kind of reminds me of that time, before, a simpler time when I was younger. And yeah, that is me. Thank you for listening. And